So how do you get the most out of this professional development? The first thing is to collaborate. You're going to gain a lot going through this alone, but you'll gain a lot more if you can do this with your leadership team or your instructional leadership team. Second, of course, is to reflect. At the end of each part, there are reflection questions, and I really urge you to take the time, pause the video, and work through those questions. Again, if you're with other people, that's fantastic, but be true to that process. That reflection is absolutely critical, and each part of the video builds on the previous one. Finally, act on it. You're going to invest some time in doing this and invest some emotional energy into the reflection. At the end of the video, there's a call to action, and I think it's going to be really important for you to take what you've learned here and do something with it. So, the flywheel of observation. The goals of this podcast are to provide clarity on teacher professional development and what your role is in that as a school leader, to increase school alignment and accelerate your flywheel, and then remain focused on the most important things. So, part one, what is a flywheel and why is it important? So, Jim Collins talked about the idea of a flywheel in his fantastic book, Good to Great. And if you haven't used that text or listened to the audiobook, I highly urge you to do that. There are a lot of great concepts in there for anybody that's focused on leading organizations. Basically, the idea behind a flywheel is that you identify something that's core to your business and core to improving your organization. And in the beginning, getting it going can take a lot of effort, and you push and you push on your push. But the more you push on it, you finally hit a point of critical mass where the flywheel starts to gain its own inertia. And at that point in time, the pushing becomes easier, but the flywheel keeps moving faster and faster. So the idea here is that engaging in a pattern of behavior will create momentum and inertia that will propel your organization continually forward and help it to get better and better. So we can look at a couple examples from other fields. So for instance, the AWS data flywheel. What are they trying to do? Their core thing is to move data, and then to make sure that they run databases that are effective, and then to build apps that allow people to innovatively use that data. The more they do that, the more data they move, the more they manage, they can build better apps, innovate more, and so this cycle repeats. Interestingly and significantly, with AWS, they also have this flywheel tack on the side, which is involved in analyzing, which is always really critical. So another example from Henry Schein in the healthcare industry looks at, if we focus on our purpose, then we're going to be more caring, which is going to lead to better performance, which allows us then to be more purpose-focused, etc. Finally, if we look at HubSpot, the idea is to attract strangers and convert them into prospects, engage them to being customers, and then delight them so that they will then promote the product to other strangers and help attract and engage and delight. So you can see the circular nature of that. And again, with all these flywheels, the idea is that if you put multiple parts of the flywheel together, it then starts spinning and builds its own inertia. So the more people, for example, in HubSpot, the more people we engage, the more we delight them, the more they bring other people in, which then lets us engage more, etc., etc. So the process continues. So what does a flywheel for education look like? How do we build that? To start, we need to go to the core purpose of why we educate kids, why we have schools, right? So you can frame that in a lot of different ways, but basically we're going to come up with something about helping students to become powerful young adults with agency, who have some control over their lives. Now, what's the core work of how do we get to that point is really about instruction. And so the way to improve student outcomes is through instruction, and the way to improve instruction is through what we would refer to as instructional improvement. In schools, the main way that we help improve instruction is through professional development of teachers. That can take a lot of different forms, and we're not going to break that down here, but let's take this idea of professional development and instructional improvement and think about how do we turn that into a flywheel. So if we take professional development, then we need to think, what are we actually asking teachers and expecting of teachers in that professional development? And we can convert those expectations into something that can be observed. And then if we engage in targeted observations of the expected behaviors coming out of professional development, we then collect observation data, and we can use that observation data to inform the next round of professional development. So, we train teachers in something. We use targeted observations to collect data on whether that training was successful. We take that data and then inform the next round of professional development. And that creates a flywheel for education. So why is a flywheel important? Well, first of all, it helps keep us focused. Second, it drives systems alignment. So most systems should be driven by a core purpose. And then other system dimensions include people, structures, and resources. And when that system is aligned, then it's very effective, and we're going to keep moving towards our core purpose. So the flywheel helps us keep focused on that purpose, but it then also helps us drive our systems into alignment. And finally, it capitalizes on the concept of leverage. So we're going to step back from the flywheel just a second to elaborate on this idea of leverage and what leverage is. So from a physics standpoint, leverage is taking a load, using a lever and a fulcrum, applying force to the lever to move the load. And leverage gives us mechanical advantage. So if we just want to move the load alone, we have to put a lot of effort into it. But by using the fulcrum and the lever, we can use less force to move a load the same way. And leverage gives us mechanical advantage. So if we just want to move the load alone, we have to put a lot of effort into it. But by using the fulcrum and the lever, we can use less force to move a load the same way. There are several factors then that are going to influence the amount of effort that you need. If we have a heavier load, then we need to increase our effort. If the fulcrum is further from the load, that again requires increased effort. And a longer lever actually decreases effort. So how does this apply to organizations? Right? There are four key concepts here. The first one is A to B. A to B really is talking about the degree of change. So if we're trying to create a big change, that's the equivalent of trying to move a heavy load. But if we're doing incremental change, which is what A to B is, then we have a light load, and that has an impact on effort. The next piece of it is what we call an MVP, or minimally viable product, and I'll reference the term MVP multiple times in this presentation. So a minimally viable product is something that is the simplest version of what you need to get the job done. So if you think about a lever, we could use a really fancy big crowbar with it's painted or inscribed and all that kind of stuff. Or we could just find a stick that's laying on the ground, and as long as it's strong enough, it'll do the job for us. So again, the MVP, or the length of the lever, influences how much effort it takes to do something. And then the concept of 0 is greater than 1. And what that means is the more we can act proactively, which is represented by 0, versus reactively, which is represented by 1, again, the less effort something will take. And finally, we've kind of captured effort with this little equation of M equals V divided by E, What that says is motivation equals the value provided divided by the effort needed. So if we want to increase motivation, we basically have two options: increase value or perceived value, or decrease the amount of effort. And so the whole idea of organizational leverage is that we're really going to focus on decreasing the effort needed to do change. We do that by making sure that we're focused on incremental, very small units of change. We take very simple levers that require very little investment in resources. We try to be proactive and move the fulcrum closer to the load so that we have decreased effort. And if we're focused on the right things, we have increased value, and that allows organizational effort to be applied to move things forward. So that's the concept of leverage. And you can see here the comparisons of what that looks like. When we talked earlier about this heavier load, the increased distance, then we need a longer, more complicated lever, and we still have increased effort. And you contrast that with the idea of organizational lever. In organizational lever, we've got A to B, which is the small load, and MVP, which is a shorter, simpler level. Decreased distance between the fulcrum, which is 0 is greater than 1. And then finally, that gives us decreasing effort with increased motivation. All right, that's leverage. Back to the flywheel. So here's how leverage plays into the flywheel. When we talk about professional development for teachers, we're talking about something that's relevant, right? So that relevance increases value. We also focus on targeted observations. So we're looking at minimally viable products. We don't want anything complicated. We're going to do something really simple. Because we have these targeted observations that are focused on this professional development, we're just trying to go A to B. We're not trying to implement some big brand new teaching style. We're looking at something much more discrete than that. And then we use that observation data to be proactive and make sure that our professional development is timely. So we don't jump steps. We focus on what teachers need right now in the moment. And then again, that creates a cycle of increasing value. So, what about you? What about your school? What's your current PD focus? And why is that your focus? How did you come to choose that? And then, are you following up? When your teachers receive professional development, what do you do to follow that up? And then, how do you use that follow-up? What determines the next professional development for you? So, we're going to pause here or stop here and give you time to really think about and address these questions. Again, it's great if you can take time and do this with a team. You're going to get a lot more power out of it. But if you're alone, that works too. So we'll pause now and take some time to really think about these questions, and then we'll build on those in the next section.